Right. Good morning. Hi, PRDecoded. We are so excited to be chatting with you all today. Wish we could be there with everyone in person. Obviously, a very different sort of year, but we're thrilled to be involved. I'm Emily Valentine, Director of Insights and Strategy at Padilla. We are a strategic communications agency with 6 offices across the country. And I also support our brand consultancy, which is Joe Smith. And I'm here today joined by the head of our insights practice, Mike Garrison.
Hi, Emily. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. Yeah, thanks for having us. It's good to be here. I'm excited to talk about this study. Really good stuff. So thanks. So
we're going to just jump right in here and take you on a little journey today with us. Seeing this photo on the big screen here, I'm realizing probably should have given you a little bit of a trigger warning because it probably conjures up some moments, some memories from the past 7 months that we'd all prefer to just make go away. But the journey that we want to go on today is really not about forgetting. It's about learning from these moments and applying what we've learned to how we can approach customer and workplace experience design moving forward. I think if we go back 7 months, each of us had a moment when we really realized this pandemic was happening and going to force a real departure from our worlds as we knew them. And as much as I'd like to be able to tell you that for me that happened upon hearing the initial warnings from the CDC, it didn't. That did not register on my radar at all. There was a little bit of denial there. So for me, when it really hit home was around something much more mundane. I'm a working mom of 2. So my ability to maintain any control over my life right now depends on how quickly and easily I can get groceries delivered. So for me, when I found myself staring at some variation on this symbol on all of my delivery apps, that's when things got really real. I mean, all the emotions, multiple stages of grief, and as embarrassingly first world as that sounds, and I'm not proud of it, it was my moment. And I imagine each of you had yours. While my mom self was raging on the delivery apps and trying to grapple with all of that, my work self was actually feeling really excited and exhilarated about what was going on. And that sounds strange, but it was really about knowing that my experience was one of millions upon millions of experiences that other people around the world were having that would collectively change our values, our behaviors, and our world at large. And so sitting on the edge of that change just felt very anticipatory. And for insights folks like Mike and myself, those moments are the ones that get us really sort of kick into gear. So we decided to get out there, not wasting time, talk to business leaders. We talked to leaders from the C-suite down to director level around the world about their experiences. Our goal in doing this all along was to be able to get to share themes from that research with folks like you to help us all better process these changes underway and prepare for the road ahead. So we're really excited to share a few of the findings with you today. And of course, always happy to discuss in further detail in our booth afterward. So what was interesting about those early days, our conversations with business leaders were very much like therapy sessions. They were really cathartic for the leaders we were talking to. They told us as much. They were cathartic for us, being, sitting, feeling with them and hearing everything that they were going through. And it didn't take long, maybe a week or 2 in, we started to realize there's something really familiar about these stories unfolding to us. They just felt really familiar. And then we realized soon enough, it's because they were mimicking this classic hero's journey that we see so often in literature and film. Leaders that we were talking to were stressed as leaders, but they were stressed as humans too. So they were struggling with new types of vulnerability across all planes of their life and really truly embarking on a journey from strength to weakness.
And so for us, this is what the journey, at least the structure of the journey, started to look like. Is the first phase about being departure, and that is classic. You're thrown into this unknown, right? A world of ambiguity. Up is down. You know, everything is confusing, and that's really where we found a lot of people. That, you know, that moves from into the phase of challenges. So once you orient yourself a little bit, you know, you find your rudder, then you begin to understand, what those challenges are and how you need to start to work through them, right? Those hardships that are fundamentally impacting both business and emotion. That leads into the third step of transformation. So once you found yourself, your place, and you start to work through those challenges, transformation is where we saw leaders begin to align their organizations behind the necessary immediate changes and strategic evolution, right? So a little bit of cause, effect, reaction. And then the fourth stage is return. And, you know, for us, return was a little bit more of a hypothesis, but early on there was, if you remember, there was conversation about by end of the summer, we'll be back to normal, right? There was this more finite way that we were looking at this pandemic, and so we would all return back to the way things were. We'll talk about that more in a second. So when we think about departure, there was a lot going on in March and April. Seems like 100 years ago, but there was a lot happening. California, as a state, they just shut down. The whole state just shut down, right? Which was crazy. NBA was canceled, which was a little bit, telling of sports in general and where we were going to sit. And then the Senate passed the $2 trillion relief package, that CARE Act, excuse me, as a response back to unemployment rates being at record highs and starting to climb even higher. From a leader standpoint, you know, this is where we saw that entrepreneurial mindset, that startup mindset, where it was a lot about, you know, businesses were working feverishly to reestablish their product, adapt, accelerate, and leaders are really energized by those opportunities, as you can see from that second quote there. Moving into challenges, you know, again, like departure, there was a lot kind of going on with challenges. There were, that's where we saw a lot of protests happen. Everything from stay-at-home orders to May Day saw a big protest around Amazon, Instacart, and others, and the work treatment that those companies were being protested against. We saw everybody's Googling, will life go back to normal? You know, again, that idea of normalcy starting to creep in and what was happening. From a business standpoint, you know, we saw a lot of that idea of coming from that entrepreneurial, that really early accelerant mindset become more about pacing, clarity, focus. So once you got out of that, and Emily even said this at the start, for her, it's like, it was energized, right? That energy was good, but what we were starting to see come out of that was, okay, we need to now start to like pace this a little bit more. We need to start to find a cadence because employees are getting burned out, right? That accelerated pace of work with no clear end of sight was taking a toll for sure, and taxing relationships with work, causing scrutiny of leadership, and really prompting questions about whether the company's values still aligned with theirs from an employee standpoint. Leaders are starting to become very, very aware of that. Then we move into transition in, you know, May, June, and you know, we saw everything from employee experiences start to change. So a lot of companies come out and said you could work for the rest of the year. You know, we even see that in 2021, even 2022 is what I'm reading now. Some companies are coming out and saying that. So there was a lot changing around that work from home, you know, office mentality. George Floyd, you know, end of May happened, which really put into the limelight a larger cultural diversity and inclusion conversations, right, and what was happening there. And then New York reopened. You know, New York was they were beginning the first stages of the reopening exactly 100 days after the first COVID case was confirmed, and we all know that state was hit the hardest. So they were a good barometer test of what was going on. From a leader standpoint, it's not so much that you know, that challenge phase was over. It was more about how challenges were beginning to fuel long-term business changes that ultimately became part of that transformation story. You know, most leaders still observed significant hesitation among customers and employees, but they were starting to say, okay, here's what this begins to look like, right? Codify that flexibility, understand that variability, but not be scared of it. How do we begin to manage it? And that was a lot of the conversations we were having with leaders. From the return side, you know, this is where I kind of teed up a little bit of a spoiler alert, but we thought there was going to be kind of this phase forward back into return. And I'm here to tell you that there's not, and there isn't, and there probably won't be. And we're not alone in this. Around this time, what we're starting to see is from the WHO to everybody else starting to talk about this idea of there is no return. There will be no normal. What does that look like when we go back? It's not going to be that old normal. So the conversation, the ethos around normality began to really change, because it was not so much about what normal looks like from a return perspective. It began to look a little bit more about like, what does now look like?
So if you take one thing away from this presentation, we hope it'll be, when you hear this talk about the new normal, when you hear talk about the next normal, just stop thinking that way. Stop thinking that there's going to be this moment of return, because the truth is we have arrived, and it's time to adapt. Now, normal isn't that nice tidy wheel that Mike just walked you through. It's a roller coaster ride on this. And I feel it every day, because every time we respond to one challenge, big or small, we get schools back up and running, for example, a new challenge presents itself and we are forced to adapt, transform again. So this process is constant. And as Mike said, return in the sense that we originally viewed it is non-existent. This loop is the return. One thing that was fascinating about talking to leaders about transformation, we were trying to kind of get their take on where they were in this loop early on, months ago. When we asked them if their business, was undergoing or had undergone transformation, most said, no, we've made some changes, big changes, but definitely not transformation, no. Then we asked them to define what business transformation looked like to them. And then we asked them what their business was focused on at the time. And they essentially, in so many words, told us, basically, we're in the midst of transformation. So what was interesting about that is it begged the question, is true business transformation something that you are able to perceive when you're in the midst of it? Or is it more like, that classic impressionist painting experience where you're up close and it's just this blobby mess until you can get a little distance, and upon reflection and looking back on it, you realize what it really was. So the question becomes, where do we go from here? Our perspective is that if you think of that infinity loop, there is tremendous opportunity where those lines intersect. What I mean by that is that taking the new behaviors and skills that we have been forced to adopt and learn in order to adapt, and then permanently embedding them into our working practices and cultures is the best way for companies to thrive moving forward. So now what we want to do is point out three sort of key takeaways, three areas of new behaviors and skills that we have been working with clients to embed into their approach to customer and workplace experience moving forward. We hope you'll keep these in mind and consider what they mean for your organization. The first is embracing entrepreneurialism. That first phase, departure into challenges, was really all about this. And there were tremendous benefits that came from it. This is not just about planning for the future, as so often we try to do in communications and marketing. It's really about making the future. So from a customer experience standpoint, that means a continuous commitment to that rapid assessment of behavior changes and then quickly building solutions for them that can be honed and improved on over time. From a workplace experience standpoint, that means working to create environments where employees have the tools, the methods, and the space, both mentally and physically, to work as empowered entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. The second one is this idea of reward adaptiveness. This is one of the big realizations for leaders these past 7 months has been that as customer behaviors and needs change, so do organizational needs. It's kind of a 1 + 1 = 2, but it makes sense, right? It's a chain reaction. So rising to meet those ongoing customer experience challenges demands new ideas, infrastructure, and skill sets. In some cases, this means needing new types of talent. In many cases, it means employees upskilling and embracing new ways of working via technologies.
Perhaps the most profound opportunity we see coming out of this lies in the power of listening. from a customer experience point of view, that means really listening to your customers and addressing their shifting needs. That may mean social listening. It may be through web analytics-based listening. Depending on the type of business you run, it may be regular Zoom focus group listening. It may be all of these things, but it needs to be something. Workplace experience. This means listening to and trusting your employees to organize and innovate. And for leaders, there's this fine line between getting clear on when to proactively lead versus when to take more of a coaching mindset. That listening theme is one that really carried through when we asked leaders toward the end of the study, what have you learned about yourself as a leader throughout these past months? We heard about the importance of humility, of openness, of not being the expert. Overall, leaders really seem to be reminded that at the end of the day, business is powered by the interdependence of people. It's not about leaders. It's about the group working together. So when it comes to keeping customers and when it comes to attracting and motivating employees today, being humble, vulnerable, and most importantly, human has never been more important. Really, the culture of organizations and their people and how leaders are showing up in this moment in time is going to define who's going to be successful in the future. And so we loved this quote from Kevin Johnson saying, if we're not changed when we come out of this, we've really missed an opportunity. So what we hope is that you'll leave this session thinking about how your organization has changed and what opportunities that opens up for permanently improving the experience that you provide customers and the workplace experience and environment that you maintain. These two, workplace and customer experience, are areas of passion for us at Padilla and Joe Smith. And so we hope you'll stop by our booth. We'd love to talk to you about it in more detail, share some examples of how we're working with clients about on this, and hear more about some of the changes and challenges you're facing. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to meeting you in the booth.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.